for me to be a successful business owner, I've got to have a desire to know more. In other words, a desire to educate, but then I've got to take on that entrepreneurial flair and begin to implement, because you can't steal second base with your foot on first base. How old are you going to be before you start to experience life like you want it? I want to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, there is a better way to do business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Business for Builders podcast. My name's Max Peterson. I'm the CEO at Smith & Sons here in Canada. Welcome to you if you're in YouTube land. Good to have you with us. Trust you're having a great day, or you've had a great day, or you're having a great day, all the above. Look, bit of housekeeping, obviously like and subscribe, hit the bell, and that way you can be advised that we are dropping another piece of content. And of course, you can contact me directly if you'd wish. If you've got a question, max@businessforbuilders.ca, and I'll be sure to get back to you as promptly as I can. Keep it to one question, and we'll be able to sort of chat on email and try and help you out in some way, shape or form. All right, today, what I want to quickly chat about is, a couple of things that actually probably aren't connected, but I think when we're trying to develop a high-performance business, I think any kind of education around these couple of subjects, and the first subject I'm going to talk about is education, and the second I'm going to talk about is targets. And really, I don't know why I jotted those notes down at once, but it's sort of, I think there's definitely some power if we can, understand the power of good education and the power of setting good targets. Perhaps actually goals might be another word that people use, but for today, I'm going to use the word target. And obviously everything that I'm sharing with you, to a larger extent or a lesser extent, has all come out of my personal experience. We work with 8 general contractors currently in 2 provinces here in Canada, and we're spread out across Vancouver Island and the Okanagan Valley and up into Edmonton. And so, I've got my work cut out for me to really, create the education side of it, but then the implementation and the execution, that's super challenging on a daily basis as well. So I spend quite a lot of time in my week chatting with general contractors on the front line and really, supporting them where we can across all aspects of running a high-performance building company. So, look, with regards to education, and, if you've watched this show for a little bit, you've heard me talk about, my probably lack of education formally, that is. I mean, I quit school in grade 11. My old man said, you're not a very good student. I'm going to quit spending money on private education. You can get out and go to tech college, which is what I did for 3 months, and then I got myself an apprenticeship. And so, but what I soon figured out was that, you've obviously heard of, you can either have book smarts or street smarts. I don't believe that I had a lot of book smarts, but, because really it's because of the type of individual that you are. So I think whether or not you go down the route that says, well, I'm going to be a street smarts because my book smart capability or capacity is not there, that's fine. What I'm going to quickly break down education around is, and this doesn't matter whether you're a book smart guy or a street smart guy. I think there's got to be some hybrid version of that. I think even for me, not being a notorious book smart student back in the day, certainly where I am today, if you went into my boardroom next door here, and you look at, there's a whole range of books that are stacked up that I've read. And so I wouldn't say I'm a bookworm, but I was always hungry for the knowledge. And so I think it comes down to the fact that I wanted to be a ninja entrepreneur. And obviously I didn't want to be a dick. I still want to be a good person. And not everybody thinks I'm a good person, which blows my mind, just by the way. Not really. But, I wanted knowledge as it related to what I wanted to do. And that's always the trick. I think I felt at school that it was completely irrelevant and I'd rather be outside kicking a football. Whereas when I got into business, I really had the desire or the hunger to actually get educated and really get a good understanding or a better understanding. So you mix that book smart with the street smart, or the ability to be fairly spontaneous in your approach, and I think that was sort of what worked for me. But I want to talk about, within education, there's 2 things: there's knowledge and there's wisdom, and I want to break those 2 things down because I think too often what I've seen this both ways. My mind is running, but here's an analogy I would give. If I play a little bit of guitar, and if I was to teach you the guitar, and maybe I've got some guitar players in our audience, But if I was to teach you guitar, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm probably going to give you a piece of music, a bit of written format, and then, maybe there's an audio version which you can listen to and you can play along with, you can watch the music. That is what I would call book smarts as it relates to playing the guitar. Now, what happens is the beautiful part about music is being able to play what I call spontaneously. And so, what we're talking about, the difference between knowledge and wisdom in business is like what you can find yourself doing is getting so stuck on the meticulous nature of the book smarts and really never ever focus on street smarts. And the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of the knowledge that you gather, if you don't execute off the back of that knowledge and step outside your comfort zone and begin to deploy that knowledge and understanding in the real world, what you'll find is you'll have a lot of knowledge but not a lot of wisdom. And so I think, that you can have a lot of people that have gone through the book process and they love the book process, but there's never, the second phase of play is never engaged, the whole execution. Because what I know is that it's one thing to have theory. When I did my apprenticeship, I did, I was practical most of the time, working on the job sites, et cetera, et cetera. But even when we went to college to do, what we'd call the theory, we would do theory and drawing, but we'd also do some practical in the shop as well. But there was always this mixture of, having to double back and do some theory as well. So it became a very balanced approach. And maybe that's where I got it from. I'm like, I understand that, a lot of it's out on site and building it as you go. But what I really loved to also understand was the technical nature, of the craft that I was trying to learn. And so I think, what we don't want to get too stuck on. Now, here's the flip side. We don't want to be just guys and gals that are out there kind of winging it in the field with no technical understanding. I think, you've heard me talk about ego and humility in equal measures. I think with regards to theory and practical, or knowledge and wisdom, you really can't have good quality. You can't develop an understanding or gather wisdom if you don't have the knowledge. And so you've got to go and get the knowledge first, and then you've got to implement. So there's this constant plan, do, check, and then act process whereby, for me, there's some things that I learn about in a book and I go, that's an interesting concept. And then I might go and research that. And then I might go and start to think about how I could implement that in my business. But that's what I've just done is gained knowledge. Where I gained the wisdom off the back of the knowledge is the implementation. And it is the either success and failure, and the success and the rebuild and the reboot and the reassess, everything. That's all of a sudden you'll feel those two parts. So instead of it being knowledge over here and wisdom over here, what we find is we merge those two. And it's like, for me to be a successful business owner, I've got to have a desire to know more. In other words, a desire to educate. But then I've got to take on that entrepreneurial flair and begin to implement, because you can't steal second base with your foot on first base. And so I think when you fuse those two concepts together and you start to understand that, even for me, I could say, well, I'm not into reading because I wasn't a very good student and I actually didn't like that at all. The minute that I transfer my focus onto wanting to be a very well-rounded, very successful business operator who can lead competently, who can develop business, and who can literally design and develop a brand that is successful, then, I've got to be able to bring those two parts together, and I've got to be very fluid, so, we talk about, being able to be like a heavyweight boxer that can take a lot of punches, but also be nimble enough to be able to sort of move around the ring and not just get caught in the one place, because ultimately even the biggest fighter can't take, punch after punch after punch. At some point they will fatigue. And so what I need you to understand is that really knowledge is that, your ability to gain knowledge is great, but your ability to go and execute and then assess honestly where things are working and not get your ego hooked up in it. I see, I've had experiences whereby, people have sort of believed in their own, they've got high in their own supply. They think that their shit doesn't stink. And all of a sudden their business begins to unravel because they wouldn't take some instruction. They wouldn't assess. They've made moves off the back of the knowledge that they might have gained, but there's something that's on the street that just doesn't work. So, knowledge is very much book smart. Wisdom is very much the street smarts, where you've seen the knowledge that you've got in real time, and you've got to have the maturity to assess whether or not it's working for you. I'm not saying the knowledge you picked up is bad, but you've got to think about yourself and what really does resonate with you and what you find you get good traction from. So we're talking about knowledge, wisdom, and another good example. I talked about guitar playing. So just back on that, for me, I love all kinds of rock and roll and blues, but I really love the blues because there's so much spontaneous guitar playing that I can do, especially playing lead and things like that. But what I find is that it does take so much spontaneity, and you've got to take risks, and you've got to be prepared to mess up. And I've done my fair share of messing up. But, after a while, as you get comfortable in the saddle, you can find yourself. And then I think what you'll find yourself doing is relying on I think you'll find, executing very exciting because you're fully expecting shit to fail, because that's part of the process. But I'm telling you, when you get it right, like a lot of the solos, let's say even in the rock and roll world that I do, if I'm just playing spontaneously, I do resonate with Angus Young, and he plays he plays an SG Gibson, and but he's very bluesy, even though it's hardcore rock and roll. He's very bluesy in his approach to playing solos, and I really, really love that. And that's the other thing too, I think it's super important. Like what I've done in the business in the last 4 years is I've really followed, Gary Vaynerchuk's cues and keys and his Gary V-isms and things like that, because I'm very much steel with your eyes and ears. And if I can find someone that I can relate to, I am really keen to just hear what they have got to say next. And even, there's not a day that goes by that I don't listen to a podcast in the morning, because it just seems to get my business gears lubed and ready to go. Rather than, as much as I love rock and roll, to drive down the street and listen to, whatever we're playing as a band. I really want to get, I'm at work and I'm want to get in the zone. And so, if I become like the people that I hang out with, then I want to make sure that I'm listening to the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, and that I'm just not burning daylight by, listening to rock and roll that really is not going to really help me in my business that day. When I'm winding down, I'm super up for, just cruising home, maybe listen to some rock and roll. But more often than not, I've got a podcast happening on my phone, and it already syncs with my truck, and I guess I'm just listening to another podcast going home. So another example, so always understand there's those two stages. You can get the knowledge, but at some point you've got to step out and start implementing, and you've got to be prepared to accept that there's going to be some errors along the way. And if you fall back on your knowledge, you can maybe make some corrections, pivot, just don't quit. That's really what it comes down to. The other example that I'll give you that I just thought of is last week I did a level 1 first aid training. And it was a hardcore sort of 8 hours, and I hadn't done any kind of first aid training since 1989. It was a bit of an eye opener, and I was just praying all day that there was going to be no exam at the end of the day. However, there was, so I was shitting bricks because I just don't do exams very well. But it turned out that it was a good day. But this is where it comes down. We got the knowledge, but you think to yourself, now I'm a level 1 first aid responder. It's fine to learn it in the classroom, but to actually go out and have a real life situation. And we did some pretty gnarly kind of examples on, how to apply first aid. And you kind of think to yourself, well, this is all cute in training where I was gaining the knowledge, right? Had the book, had the instructor. There was a bunch of other people. There's like 15, 16 other people in the room. And it's all very kind of, role play type stuff. But, the reason I did that level 1 is because we're in need of a backup level 1 first aid attendant at our race meetings. And so, it crossed my mind. It's like, okay, so what if there's a significant race meeting? Am I going to be able to implement or execute in real life off the back of the knowledge, let's say, that I've gained? And of course, my first worry, and this is obviously for you guys and gals in business, my first worry is, what if I can't remember what to do? And I think in business, it's the same. We hit real life situations and we're like, what was I supposed to say in that sales meeting? Where was I supposed to take that meeting? And so, look, I think, what you've got to do is when you've got that book knowledge, you've got to go and try it. And then you go and you really try and set the meeting up the way you want. And then after the meeting, you do a debrief with yourself and go, where did I go wrong? What didn't I do really well? What did I do, pretty awesome? Where did I kick some goals? Where did I really, miss the point? And so, this struggle between just gaining, some people think, well, if I can get the book knowledge, I'll be good. Unfortunately, you've got to have the thing, you've really got to have that, whatever it is that you're struggling with, let's say, or whatever you're trying to educate yourself with, you've really got to immerse yourself in that and allow that education that you get from the, from the book, or the knowledge component, that it really does saturate and permeate your being so that it becomes second nature. So I think what we're talking about is things like muscle memory. And I've talked about this before. It's like I've got to develop the technique first. So we take that knowledge that we've just learned and we slowly develop the technique in real life. And then as we do that and we're consistent and we're persistent, what we can find is that that becomes, the muscle memory kicks in, and all of a sudden it really does become part of our narrative whenever we go and do meetings, whenever we make phone calls, however we're talking to subcontractors. And what we're developing over a period of months and years more like is this ability to operate business. Now, conversely, if you're not gaining knowledge the proper way, whether it's, podcasts or videos or books or seminars or webinars or whatever the case may be, what you're doing is you're not designing you as a business person. You're actually just kind of happening. It's by default. You're just kind of picking up snippets here and there, and you're watching other people, and they're blind, and and you're blind, and nobody knows where they're going. So it's important that, like I said, go back to the start. You become like the people you hang around. So where are you getting your information from? Where are you gaining your knowledge from? And then, this is why we talk about in the business of Smith & Sons, coaching is so important, because I give these guys, 700-page operations files, and we've got the brand, and we do a lot of the digital marketing. And there's a lot of things that we take care of, but then they've got to go into the field and implement all of that knowledge that they've gained. And most of it they've probably forgotten when they walk out of, the 4-day training, and they've got to start. And this is where the coaching comes in, because they say, what am I supposed to be doing here? Or how do I use this piece of software to generate a purchase order again? Like those kinds of things is where the bounce back from knowledge to wisdom to knowledge to wisdom. So as time goes by with consistent, persistent effort, over time they're becoming more wise. In other words, they are familiarizing themselves much more with how to build a successful business. And the thing is that I think that every mile, you walk a mile, you see a mile, but every mile that you go, you realize how much you don't know. Matter of fact, I was at a kids' football game on Sunday, and if I can quote this right, I think it was Thomas Edison that said something like, the knowledge that we have is the knowledge that we have is just one drop, but the knowledge that we don't have, or what we don't understand or don't know, is the ocean. And so that's the game. I think that you'll never get to a point, even for me, you'd think, oh, well, when I've reached the CEO position and I'm in charge of a national company, I've made it. Well, honest to God, it's just like I've got to this position, and all of a sudden I've realized how much that I don't know, how much that I have to learn. And so there's this consistent desire for knowledge, and then implementation, and then correction, more knowledge, more implementation, more correction. And so, that's the challenge, I think, guys and girls. Now, I don't want to plateau. That's just me. That's what I say. I think there's so much opportunity. The word retirement doesn't even come. I mean, what am I going to freaking do? Like, seriously? If I was making $1 million a day, I mean, I'd have to go and find something to do. I really love doing what I'm doing. So for the moment, retirement is not on the schedule. Because I really do enjoy giving value to both retail clients and also to our general contractors who are part of the Smithies group. Okay, so education, knowledge and wisdom, book smart, street smarts. Just think about those couple of things, and hopefully that'll help you. The second thing that I'm quickly chat about, and we'll wrap up after this, is targets. I think really what we've got to, if I was to ask you, what does your business cost you to run every month? In other words, what are your fixed expenses? What's your salary? What is the total? What is the dollar amount that you need to run your business every month? If you can't answer that, then you need to just time out, and that's the first thing you need to do, is sit down and figure out what my business costs me. Because how do you know how many contracts you have to write a month? How many sales do you need to close each month? What does your business need to survive? What kind of markup percentages do I need to apply to ensure that on the projects that I'm going for, that I win over a period of a quarter, am I going to be able to fund the business to a point where it not only feeds or maintains that business, but it creates what we call profit, ironically enough, or some operational capital. And so, ultimately the two things that really your business thrives off, and I would call it the flywheel of your business, would be your sales, no question. There's a saying, sales cures everything. But I think further to that, what you've got to do once you sell it, now you've got an element of profit that's built into that sale, I would hope. And I'm really hoping that it's an appropriate amount of markup and you're not working for free, because last time I checked, you can't pay your rent with peanuts and bottle tops. So you need to make sure that you understand what your business needs so you can turn your attention to an appropriate sales target. So just some information around that. It's really, we can't talk about what is the appropriate, profit margin, although, probably a 30 to 35% profit margin is probably a good start, which means you're going to need to mark up between 45 and 50% on your cost of goods sold, i.e. your suppliers and your sub-trades or your subcontractors. Now, that's for reno. If you're doing new homes, the numbers are a little bit different to that. But nonetheless, you've got to understand your business very intimately, and you've got to understand, what your business needs to survive. It's really hard, because what I'd love to do is I'd love to do a one-on-one session with you to talk about what your business goals are, what you want from your business, talk about the types of clients that you find yourself working for, look at, what projects do you like to work on? Are you a decks and fences guy? Are you a bathrooms and kitchens guy or gal? Are you a basements or an addition type, guy or gal? And that really is going to tell me, because then the other question I'll have to you is, what is your appetite for risk look like? Are you like me, that is an absolute pioneer to the core and loves to, I love, once I'm sure that I want to be there, I'm enjoying the pioneer process, but I don't just go and run after everything. And so there's a lot of these questions that it's just not a metric facing type subject that I want to chat about. Although, if we could nail down, who you are and what your goals are and where you're going and how long you've been in business, what's your skill set, what's your experience, how soon do you want to sell the business perhaps, or whatever the case may be, then we can focus on some of the metrics. But what I want you to think about is, if you can think about that as a side note and go, okay, what is my goal? What is my why? Why am I doing this again? Do I get up because I need to practice at knocking nails into wood, or have I got a new couple of kids that I really want to spend more time with, or I want to be able to make sure that I'm not working weekends, or whatever the case may be. Maybe you want to go away 2 or 3 weeks a year to Mexico, or whatever the case is. You've got to do it by design. You've got to start thinking about it now. Please don't go another week without sitting there and actually working on your business, not in your business only. And I think Warren Buffett said the thing that most business owners don't do badly or not enough of in North America is take time out to think about their business. And I love coming in early mornings. I certainly, the weekends when I can, I enjoy the quiet, because like I said to my team this morning, I love that quiet time because it's my creative. We will always shoot a podcast before midday, because I'm telling you, once midday hits, Australia starts to wake up. All of my general contractors kind of get their day organized. And if I'm going to get phone calls, it's going to be usually after lunch. So I'm really identifying the pockets whereby, I work on my business here, but then I also identify the segments of my life and my calendar where I can work on my business rather than just in my business, and start organizing myself. And part of that is thinking about, targets. And so, for you as a general contractor, what you've got to understand is that when you do mark up, let's say you had $100,000 worth of cost of goods sold, that was your subcontractors and your suppliers, and let's say you marked that up by 43%. That would essentially mean what you've done is you've built $43,000 worth of profit into that project. So we've got a contract price of, let's say, $143,000, let's say plus tax in your area, but nonetheless, we've built into that project, $43,000. Now, if you do that project in a month, you're kicking ass and taking names, you're absolutely dominating. If that project takes you 12 months, you're in deep shit. So this is why, for us here at Fixed Price Land, which is essentially what we really do present to retail customers to add value to our presentation. It's certainly one of the features and benefits of doing business with a Smith & Sons general contractor. What it does is it does create the ability for us, and it's double-edged. If you don't deliver, if your estimating is bad and you don't deliver efficiently, you will lose money, no question. If you're very good at your estimating and you've got good contingencies and you've got cushions built in, and you can deliver very expeditiously and efficiently, then what you'll find is you'll love Fixed Price, because you can turn $43,000 worth of forecast profit into $50,000 quite easily. Especially if you do it, under the designated time, and certainly under the budgeted amount to cost to build, and so that's super important. So with that $43,000, what you've got to understand is that essentially, if you multiply and you take your calculator right now and you go $143,000 times 30%, what you'll come up with is just a pinch under 43,000. So what you got to understand is the markup is the action, margin is the result, or it's the outcome. So you mark up by 43%. What you've just done is built in a 30% profit margin, because you're calculating the markup off a smaller dollar figure, then you're calculating the margin percentage of the bigger dollar figure. I know that's a bit confusing, but just need to get your head around that. So what we've got is essentially we've got what we call a 30% gross profit margin percentage. That means, and this is where I start to talk about targets more specifically. Let's say this project takes you 4 months. Let's say to make it easy, let's say you've got this project that takes you 4 months, and so you're going to make a 25% claim at contract signing. The second month you're going to take another 25%. The third month and the fourth month you're going to take another 25%. I wouldn't advise you do that, because you've got to follow your cost spikes within the build. You need to identify those, make sure that you're cash flow positive, but you're making sure, and we won't talk about that now, but make sure your work in progress is being analyzed to know what your level of liability is, right? But understand that when you make that 25% claim, what would 10% be? 10% is 14,000. Oh, I might need a calculator. That'd be 140 grand. So 14,000 times 2 is 28. What do you got for me, Dom? No, just multiply 143,000 by 25%, which is about 34 grand by 25%. Okay, 35,000. Okay, so let's 35,750. You got to understand, actually, and don't throw that away, because 35,000, what was it, 350? You go show me? Yeah, right. So 35,750. Now multiply that by 30%. So what I'm doing, folks, is I'm identifying what is your money, right? So out of that 35,000 on just a ballpark, 10,000, thanks, Dom, 10,000 of that is your money. So what happens is, we get these big checks that come in, but you've got to understand that if your business cost you $15,000 to run, then that one project is not enough. Because like I said, if I did one claim for that month and it was $35,000, of that $35,000, only 30% is mine, which is about 10 grand. If you only make that one claim, then your overheads are $15,000 for the month, then you're losing $5,000 a month. So what your target needs to be is it needs to be more than that, depending on what your fixed expense is. So if your fixed expense was $10,000 and you did one project where you invoiced for 25% of the contract amount, let's say it was $35,000, of that $35,000, $10,000 of that is yours, and your fixed expenses are 10 grand a month, then you're what I would call your break even. However, what you've got to make sure you're putting your GST aside if you've got sales tax on top of that number, which is fine because we're not talking about that. But the other thing you've got to be mindful of is your corporate income tax as well, and certainly your personal tax. So there's a lot of where let's call it blind spots or blind sides. Let's say my kid played football. He's 13 years old, and what position does Lockie play? He plays corner, and he was chasing, I think it might have been a kickoff, or someone had run through the line of defense and he was chasing him, and he got blindsided by this other kid to the point where it wiped him out and he had to come off. And of course he was iced up after the game and stuff. But I think builders do the same thing. They're focused on doing sales and building houses, but what the blind side that they don't take into consideration is what's their business costing them to run per month. What are their tax obligations in their area? They're not mindful of collecting GST and storing GST if it's applicable in your area. And then all of a sudden at the end of the year when they do their accounting, they do their year-end accounts with their accountant, all of a sudden they've got themselves a massive bill. And so really this is why I keep talking about we've got to be a designer over just default. You're either going to have a business by design or a business by default. You choose. And so if that's new news to you, you need to start thinking about what are my blind spots. And actually, here's something maybe I'll do this on the next podcast, and or maybe I'll write it down for next time. We'll talk about a SWOT analysis where you analyze your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And definitely financial management is a massive threat to most general contractors because they're very confident in what they can do in the selling phase sometimes, and certainly in the building phase. What they don't understand is the business management, the strategic planning, the business development side. It just doesn't get taught to us guys and gals at college when we do our apprenticeship, that is for sure. And so, I'm talking about really what you've got to do is you've got to nail down your fixed expenses. You've got to know what you need to sell per month and then what you need to claim per month. So you might have, and this is where what we want to do is we want to create evergreen high performance businesses. If you've got a business that's got hills and valleys, and you know what I'm talking about, we've just come into fall, we're 3 months away at least, or maybe not quite, from the snow flying. All of a sudden, we're going into a dark winter, and all of a sudden you'll find that typically you might say, well, look, my lead gen just falls off a cliff. I've got to conserve, I've got to build as much as I can into the bank account during spring, summer, and fall, because I know that winter's always just, dead as a maggot and there's no inquiry. What we want to try and do is level out those hills and valleys and create some consistency. Part of that process is to develop, a brand and a business and a messaging that gives some value or a lot of value to our clients, and keeps the phone ringing even in the times where, you don't think you would normally get inquiry. I think this year so far, January was our highest number of inquiries for this year. There's no question. I don't think we've outperformed the January level of inquiry. So, I look at the opportunity that happens over Christmas when people are getting together and they're talking about their experiences and they're talking about the New Year's resolutions that they got and things like that. Part of that is, hey, I want to renovate my kitchen, or hey, I want to do a back deck, or I want to do, a 2-story addition, or whatever the case may be. And then they've got a little bit of time, maybe, in a couple of the days off, the stat holidays, or you might have vacation time over Christmas or what have you, and you're going to find that people will start to sort of inquire. They're out there. The trouble is that us builders, maybe this is you, maybe you get to November, December and go, forget about it, I'm going to turn my marketing off because I'm trying to conserve my cash at bank, when really, even though it feels counterintuitive, that might be the best time for you to throw a little bit of money at, some sponsored Facebook ads or some Google AdWords or whatever the case may be. Make sure you do your research and don't waste your money. I think a lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to build some predictability into our business, but more importantly into our cash flow. Because, and I'm not going to talk about, scalability or how to scale up a construction company, on the episode today. We're a few minutes in already. But if you're not creating profit, that's bad. More importantly, what you're trying to do with some of that profit is reinvest in the business to, either upskill, add, equipment and machinery, add new human resource, all of the above perhaps, to really start growing a business whereby you're really using that business of yours to really be a cornerstone or a foundation stone to building to putting together a wealth creation plan. I know too many builders that are still, 80 years old, not 80, but maybe 65 to 75, who are still frontline operations because they never did get the development of their business off the ground and underway, utilizing business systems, being a good talent scout, having good humans, replacing them as the operator, and having the business pay them a very healthy dividend. And so, I think... So, micro sales targets would be, how much do I need to sell every month to make sure that in 3 months I've got, work for my guys? And then in the month that I'm talking about right now, what is the number that I need to, do I need to make sure that I issue $150,000 worth of invoices, or does it need to be $400,000 worth of invoices? Whatever the case is for you, you've just got to be able to figure out use a formula to figure out where my business is up to right now and where do I want to take my business to. So sales and claims as far as targets are super important, but you've got to know your fixed expenses. Look, I think that's probably about all for today. I talked quickly about education and then I talked about targets. They do go hand in hand, because if you're gonna set targets and you're gonna want to know about business development, that's gonna take some understanding and some knowledge, which then you can bring back and start implementing in your business. So it's very cyclic. You got to take that knowledge, you've got to implement it. And if you want to know more about targets and what sales claims. What sales I've got to make, what claims I've got to make each month, and how to develop a business, then that's going to take some research. So you really need to get your head in the game if you want to scale up a business. If you're happy doing what you're doing and at the level you're at and you're making good money, you've got a good lifestyle, mazel tov, don't change anything, because it's all about your happiness. But if you're not happy just to stay, at a level and you want to move up, understand higher the levels, bigger the devils. I did a couple of episodes ago. I did one, in that regard. So, look, again, like and subscribe. Share this with someone who you know might need it. Be sure to email me, max@businessforbuilders.ca, if you need more info. And we look forward to chatting with you again on the next episode. Go build a kick-ass business. See you next time. Cheers.